All right. Getting started a little later than I was hoping to today, but we're here regardless with the spin drift and everything. All right. And also, I hope my mic is getting better results. It's been really quiet every time I try to use it recently. So, um, yeah. All right. There's a couple of things that I wanted to schedule out today. So I want to try to be more consolidated with these streams. I think I need to focus more on editing when I have the time, or at least selecting content. I want to start with this clip of Tim Miller talking to Ben Rhodes because I think there's something really important here that is just being forgotten because of the kind of person that Tim Miller is as a media personality. I think he's very good at his job. So that being said, I dislike Tim Miller more than almost anyone in politics, left or right. He's a really conspicuous figure. So before I even go into this, I want to give a quick clarification of who these two people are, right? So Tim Miller is this Republican stalwart, ardent neocon, runs the comms team for Jeb Bush in his 2015 presidential campaign, runs maybe one of the worst comms jobs maybe ever, at least that I know of. And he rebranded as this sort of never Trumper Republican, but has at this point just become a full on Democratic Party operative. Ben Rhodes is a little more distinct. Ben Rhodes has been, in politics on the Democratic Party side for a while, and he was a staffer early on for Obama, and was known to be one of the more important speechwriters. Now he's more in this Pod Save America sphere, this bizarro, Democrat alt media space, you could call it. And let's just watch this clip in full first, and I can go into why there's so much maliciousness going on here now at the two backgrounds of these guys.
Our bet was you open this up, you let Americans travel down there, you let Americans invest there. This place that's 90 miles from Florida is going to change. Cubans' lives will get better. And then ultimately, we're not going to be the ones to determine it. We're not going to be the ones to pick the next leader of Cuba, but we think that will work better than what we've been doing for 60 years. Trump came in, he, over time, with the urging of Marco Rubio in the first term, basically rolled back all of the opening in terms of travel and, investment and things like that. They kept the embassies open, so the diplomatic relations piece remained. And then over time, they squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. Biden was a chicken shit and was afraid to go back to the Obama policy because he was afraid of Bob Menendez. So we somehow got the Trump policy through Joe Biden's administration, in the same way that Biden was afraid to come back into the JCPOA because he was afraid of Bob Menendez and FDD for criticizing him. So
that's great. Good thing that we knew that Bob Menendez was a great moral arbiter, as we saw, and it was important to kind of let him.
Literally, that's what happened. But the point is that now Cubans are suffering more than they ever have, I think, in their history. They have, because in addition to the sanctions, there's now a fuel blockade on Cuba from the Trump administration. You have people dying because of those sanctions. I think Americans don't like to think about that. But the reality is when the power goes off, babies in the NICU and people on ventilators die in hospitals. You've got extreme malnourishment in Cuba. So it's a real dire humanitarian circumstance in Cuba right now.
Okay. So I think this clip shows everything wrong with this new failed political activist from the Obama era rebranding as this sort of truth sayer that knows something that no one else knows. When Ben Rhodes is saying that Biden was a chicken shit about being afraid of Bob Menendez, excuse me, and that's why he didn't replicate the policy of the Obama administration relative to being less hawkish in regards to adversarial countries. What he's missing, or not missing, what he's intentionally trying to deceive people of, is that outside of the Obama administration, a lot of these policies were seen to be failures, not even because they were necessarily poorly thought or delivering poor results, but they were electorally crushing, in the sense that when Trump is able to run after Obama, he's able to use the JCPOA as like a huge foreign policy motivator. And a lot of people in the State Department already were not really convinced on the effectiveness of Obama leading a more developmental role. But, what does he mean when he say that Biden was chicken shit, right? What does he mean that, he doubled back and didn't roll back enough this Trump administration internationalization with blockading Cuba and such? Well, it's a little more complicated than what's lit on. There is a concerted attempt right now to frame the Cuban situation as a result of just pure United States malice. And with the Trump administration, there absolutely is quite a lot of it. But going back to Biden, what is Cuba acting as? Internationally, they're a proxy for Iran, Russia, and Venezuela. They are an intermediary point still, where you have their cooperation with these forces, which again, one way or another, you can understand that. But let's actually go in. Maybe people think, okay, well, why didn't Biden, be less harsh in Cuba? Well, we can just go through and see. We can go read some of it. So going here, we have the Library of Congress. Oh, excuse me. That's the wrong thing. We can actually just look through and see what Biden was thinking. So Biden did want to get rid of some of the things that Trump had installed initially. These are the three changes he wanted to get with U.S.-Cuba policy. He wanted to get rid of their designation that they're a state sponsor of terrorism. He wanted to actually adjust that, because he had found, they did diplomacy. And even this, oh, hey, I'm all good. How you doing, man? I was just going over this Cuba stuff. You'll see all these reversals from the Trump administration regarding Cuba, and the motivations of this are much more, they're much more obvious. No, I've streamed a few times recently. I've just been getting started. I was trying to do a politics stream, and I've been just doing most of the stuff for YouTube so far, where I just stream to kind of no one and then upload clips or long forms. But I appreciate you stopping by. It's nice. Yeah, I hope everything's good for you today. Sorry about that too. But you see here, there's an extreme amount of aggression compared to normal diplomacy with the Trump administration in regards to Cuba. And it's because the people he has staffed, these Marco Rubio types and other traditional neocons with these Cuban backgrounds, they want to. Oh, it's not a serious thing. I'm just doing my free time right now. Yeah, it's not a huge investment. I just doing it for fun, when I'm off work or whatever. I'm interested in the politics stuff. Is just not a you know, primary outlet. Yeah, thank you. Um, and yeah, it's you can see during like the Trump nomination stuff, Marco Rubio has stated before like he thinks Cuba should be seen as a yeah. I'll usually cut my stream stuff because I'm not really streaming to anyone. You know, like these are zero viewer, 1, 2 viewer streams usually. So I'll basically just do you know, live reactions or something akin to prepared content where I have like a dossier like filled out on another screen, and I'll sort of you know, do an off the cuff sort of reading of that stuff where I'm like, you know, fleshing things out by talking about them, but they're just like ideas before then. So I tried video essays in the past, but they could never take off really. I guess I wasn't very good at them. It's a cool badge you have. I've never seen that before. Yeah, so in this case, for instance, what I was doing was I'd, you know, like take a clip like this and watch it. And prior to the stream, I would have like, you know, gone through and like, you know, read some stuff about it or whatever. To have like that background, and then I'll kind of go through my thought process with it. Where these guys, I'm not a huge fan of these two. And I was sort of describing why, where I think there's, you know, some things to get wrong or whatever. Yeah, yeah. I've done games a few times actually. I'll do it occasionally. Like there have been times where I've had a couple like people like call in or like do like a debate or whatever, and it'll be you know, I'll have a game on in the background or something, or if it's more casual. But right now, because I'm, you know, my hours are kind of limited, just because this is not my job or anything. I just try to make sure that like I can get like the base content out that I can make long form and shorts of. But the games not having the same sort of like reach, you know. I'm a pretty casual gamer. I'm not like great in anything. I mostly play Deadlock right now, which I don't even know if there's much of a streaming audience for if you're not good. But yeah, I do a lot of the politics discussion stuff. Yeah, there's not much on Twitch anymore. Thank you. It was weird because back in the day, I remember when I was in like high school and like early college, you had like these like giant debate panels all the time on Twitch, and you had a bunch of streamers. And I really don't know any of them on Twitch anymore aside from Hassan. And I guess Asmongold, but even that's weird because he wasn't politics back then. He was, you know, a gamer dude. So it was it's you know, just throwing my hat in there because I don't know if it's a lack of market or if there's, you know, just the changing demographics or whatever. But yeah, I do like, I'm a pretty like open-minded guy, but I end up doing, you know, I skew towards the Democratic Party, but I'm, you know, I think I have a pretty good read on like a lot of people. No. I've been into politics forever. That's kind of why I just started doing this, or giving my try at it, because like I read all this stuff, you know, all day when I'm at work or whatever. So there's no reason not to try to like take advantage of it, I feel like. And I was in yeah. And in college I was like a philosophy major, but I focused on politics, like political philosophy a lot. So again, it just doesn't feel satisfying not to try to like use that time to do something that could be productive. And yeah, it feels weird on Twitch how like there's just like I don't know why there's just so few people now. Again, maybe the market just isn't there. Maybe, yeah, that could be the case. I know Asmongold has had that thing, but like I don't know, it's weird. Like yeah, that is true. Like when I've heard Asmongold talk about this stuff in the past, because to be honest, I don't watch his stream. It's like it's so weird because it's always the same couple of things, and it's just him like ragging about immigration or whatever, but it's not even talking about it. It just seems really boring. But maybe there's a market for it or something. And obviously, back in the day, I don't know if it's still the case, but like, you know, a lot of the more crazy Trump people were all banned from Twitch. I don't know when that changed, because I feel like if Asmongold was in like 2016 Twitch, he would have gotten banned for a lot of what he said, but maybe he's too big to do that now. Yeah, no, 100% makes sense. Yeah, I actually understand that. Yeah, because politics can be entertaining for some people, but you know, for a lot of people, it's just stressful. So I get it, and it's invading so many spaces because, excuse me, like I feel like it must be so like, it must feel really weird to be like an Asmongold viewer, and you're watching him for the gaming for years and years and years, and then his content just becomes total politics. Like I can't, you know, it's probably really like confusing, or not just confusing, but like upsetting. That's happened to so many different like, you know, old school creators. Yeah, 100%, and they should be. I mean, they're, you know, I think the issue too is that like it's really hard to like, if someone's not being respectful about it, like someone like Asmongold, like, you know, he says some pretty crazy or some very mean, I guess would be a good way to put it. Says some pretty mean things about like the people he's talking against. So like, I don't know. Yeah, yeah. It's not. It's like it's one. It's just, you know, it's a little. I'm not perfect, but like those guys' politics, they start and end on Twitter, and Twitter is fine as like a place to jump off, but like you have to do some reading outside of that. That's why you know, I wanted to do Ideal on this channel a little bit more, or like the long form stuff is just sort of bite sized breakdown, but things you know, the things I might know or learn more things. Like silly things like this, even like where like people like forget like this is a guy who is a Republican and is now a Democrat, and I think there's some things that get lost in translation of like why something like that makes that shift. That can be easily explained, but they're oftentimes just sort of like glazed over because, you know, it's easier to have like a narrative like that. Yeah, and it's, I mean, people need things to cope with, obviously. Like that's like a huge thing. And that's why actually I'm like, it's a unpopular opinion somewhat, but I think like there's a good reason why some people like you just shouldn't vote sometimes. Like if you're someone who doesn't want to get informed, not because you know, you're just privileged, or maybe you're someone who's just trying to get by, you know, not everyone has to make this their thing. Not everyone has to double down on that. But that being said, like there needs to be like a standard set for people then. So like, you know, it's very weird. Like some of the LA streamers, for instance, like they'll say political things when it's like convenient, where it's like something that's like gonna get them pats in the back from people around them, but then they'll be silent for things that might be more important. But it's, you know, it's an opportunism thing. But I understand that. Like it's not, you know, I think it's easy to sort of also criticize that because it's like everyone wants to feel like they're on the right side or whatever. But there's something to be said about just like keeping a distance. Like, I don't know how old you are. I'm not that old. I'm 25, but like, I feel like there's like a much larger gap in like media from the 2000s, for instance. Like it's just, people really did try to keep politics separate, but you can't really avoid it anymore. So, you know, if you can't avoid it, I think there's like something to be said about actually, trying to like synthesize them in a way that isn't harmful, or at the very least is like harm reductionist. Like an example being is like, you know, Ragnar, this is the biggest figure. Like when Asmongold talks about like how he wants hot women in video games because it appeals to him, and that, you know, it shouldn't be the case that people who don't play games or people who are minority party in gaming, you know, shouldn't be appealed to, that they're a minority for a reason. They shouldn't, you know, he shouldn't have to they shouldn't have to compromise like the core audience or whatever. And like people might hear that initially just say that's disgusting, blah blah blah, and it is. And but like, that's not just the only problem. Like it's just like a very like there's more to it than just being gross, you know. And if someone's gonna have that opinion, it's gonna become mainstream. Like you have to know how to deal with that. An example being is like part of the reason why like media can be good or do interesting things with like representation or whatever is because like sometimes you don't know what you want before you get it, or sometimes culture needs to be shaped by the people who are like making the thing itself. So an example being like, yeah, absolutely, yes. That's, yeah, the basicness of it is like, again, because like someone like, and that example of like video games, like when someone has been gold is like, you know, it's frustrating when, you know, women aren't hot in my video games or whatever. Like that is simple. It's a simple problem in that I don't feel like I'm being appealed to anymore. The viewers agree with him because there's a lot of people who agree with that. And the solution is just to stop doing that instead of like having a broader question about like, you know, why is inclusivity important in media? Why is it important to show a variety of different people and different things? Or how do you like, you know, make something meaningful that doesn't have to, you know, be reduced to a binary of like, does this make me like sexually attracted or whatever? Yeah, Mamdani's doing a really good job. You know, I disagree with a lot of the policy stuff he might have been putting forward in the past, but like, dude is a generational talent. Like, it's impossible to deny he's so charismatic. He knows how to speak to people. He knows like what issues matter. But like the biggest thing is like I've seen he is just so quick on the flag. Let me try to find this clip. Like you might have seen this, but it's an awesome clip. He just he killed it with this. He gets like I don't know, he gets like harassed at an event. Like someone like says something to him. And he just takes it like so well and like turns it around and says like, I love this city because I want to be able to, you know, be somewhere where someone like that can talk to me like this. He obviously says it a lot better than that. But like being able to see like someone in any political position, like in that moment, immediately take in what would otherwise just be a critique or otherwise just be like even anger and like turn it around that smoothly. I mean, that is a spooky person. Because most politicians can't do that. They can't be dynamic. They can't be responsive to people in that way. Like they can't make it seem effortless. I think it's partially because, or this is like I guess it's a huge thing in general. Politicians like really like to be either like down to earth or like Trump, like this sort of like I'm the boss, like you know I'm someone who needs to be respected, and there is a place for that. But like the really cool middle ground is, or the successful middle ground too, is someone who is simultaneously relatable, but it's because they're a like genuinely relatable leader. So like this is very funny, but there's a guy who wrote about this concept named Alexis Tocqueville. So he was a French guy, like Frenchman, who came to America prior to the Civil War and did like a almost like geographical survey of the country, and sort of wanted to learn about the people, learn about the culture, learn about the way that Americans actually lived. And he came back to France and wrote a book about that called Democracy in America, where he sort of describes what he sees as like all the pros and the benefits, as well as the cons to America. And he made some very like big predictions. Some of the crazy ones are like he predicted the Civil War. He predicted that the Cold War. So the Cold War 100 years later, he was able to predict based on the principles that he got from being here. And the way he described it was like the ideal politician in America is this guy who's basically like a horizontal aristocrat. Where in Europe you have all these, you know, landed gentry, these old rich people, right? They were crazy predictions. But you had these like old rich people, right? Like the aristocracy, the people who were barons, kings, or whatever, and then downstream from that. And you had those people who were just born into wealth, born into power, and then the people who were like the peasantry. And in America, he found that there was a totally different dynamic, which was that even the people who made something for themselves, who became rich on their own, you know, backs, that even when they got to that level, they never wanted to be seen as like higher than other people because like the American disposition is just so against that. Like they're so, the American disposition is so anti like feeling yourself like that, if that makes sense. So what people wanted was this idea of like a horizontal aristocrat. Instead of like being above, you're like on the same level. So it's like not that you're better because you have wealth or you're better because you made wealth or whatever, but you're just like them, that anyone could do this, and that, you know, your excellence is a product of hard work that anyone is capable of. And so like Mamdani hits that perfectly, where you see him, he's like a total professional. You know, he's dressed well always, and in a very like kind of like at this point antiquated way, always wearing a tie and a suit. He speaks like super eloquently, very, very like very great read of the room. So he always seems like someone who is serious, who is a sort of like elite, but like he's so relatable. He's so easy to listen to. Um, so it's, regardless if you love him or hate him, he's an extremely impactful guy. He's like the new model, I would say, probably for successful politics. It is a shame though, because I think the one thing that's a little iffy on him is like the policies he ran on. I think there's a lot to them, but he actually underperformed relative to his races. So like, if you look at the national averages for all of the political races in 2025, people think that the Democrats did very, very well for like no reason, or they just did well because of Trump or whatever. But there was a interesting sort of dichotomy to that, which was that certain candidates may have won, but they did worse than they were supposed to. So with like Mamdani, he was against Cuomo and what's his name? Eric Adams. Eric Adams drops out late in the race, and then Cuomo is this, disgraced, kind of gross guy. So, on paper, he should have done better relative to who he was, going against. But he still did well, considering how unpopular some of his policies are. And I think it's great. I think it'll be. I hope he actually is able to get to do some of the more crazy stuff, like the free buses or the public grocery store, because even if they don't work out, I think it would be best to get the data from them, right? Just to like actually see if there is something to it. If there's like a like sort of what's the word? To see if there's more of a nuanced opinion that people can have on these policies that would otherwise be pretty unpopular. So, yeah, sorry, I was kind of ranty. It's just, Mamdani is a super interesting guy in that respect. Like, I think love him or hate him, there's a lot of ways that he could be kind of transformational to politics. Super bringing people into the fold who might have never been a part of it because of their disposition or whatever. Let me close some of these tabs too. Well, I have this. Also, so why is this not showing? Huh. Also, if anyone is watching still, and you can give me feedback on my mic, because I've been trying to get it to sound better recently. I don't know why, but it's been very quiet. So yeah, but let me get back into this. You have the other Tim Miller video too. Let's see. Sorry, one second. I'm just closing some tabs for anyone who's in the stream. It's gonna be so funny if I go back and post and the mic is somehow worse after I raise the volume significantly and I'm talking into it. I'm just trying to eliminate the stupid mouth noises and stuff, but that's a whole separate issue. Let's see. Why is this not loading correctly? Well, I'm trying to find this other Tim Miller video to pull up. I'm gonna use the bathroom. I'll be right back. Let me just go to the just chatting and back to this. And yeah, I'll be right back. I just realized my mic was off for all of that. That is so funny. Hold on. I need to actually check that. I just realized my mic was off for all of that. That is so funny. I don't want to reread this article. That is so dumb that my mic was turned off the entire time. Bro, what is happening? I have one concurrent viewer. Probably myself, of course. So when I tell people that I think Tim Miller is one of the worst people operating, at least in the Democratic Party campaign or the messaging apparatus, they always find that a bit strange because Tim Miller is one of the most, at this point, liked members of like the resist lib, anti-Trump, whatever, never Republican coalition. And you see a lot of even almost borderline like left-leaning people or leftist people having positive views towards him. And I think it's hard to explain without getting a little more into Tim's past and his actual thinking for why I find him so repulsive. But I think this, at this point, relatively unread and under-discussed farewell to the Republican Party that he wrote in 2020 reveals a lot. And so this him describing, let's just go through the article. I'm not going to read all of it because a lot of it is useless. You can go and check any of this yourself if you don't think that I'm going to be accurate, but have some faith. So this first part of the article, him describing his GOP, why he was associated, there's some really weird things in here, and I don't think they're coincidental. The first thing is that when he talks about what brought him to the party as like a child, he says, I don't exactly recall what brought me to these characters. Which is strange, but again, I think there's a reason for that. I think there's something more to what he's not letting us know. And then he mentions, well, no, then when I went to listen to Bob Dolan, I hear of his speech. I hear him talking about this, being the party of Lincoln and all this stuff. And man, I really got that. And so he's describing what I would consider, big L liberalism, meaning not just liberalism, like the classic sort of like, core fundamentals of liberal politics, but more importantly, or more broadly speaking, he's describing the party of a more progressive liberalism. But now he talks about how, well, the party seems different now because you have white nationalist collaborators and nativists, and that's real confusing. But then we get into this next section that he claims that the party didn't really change and he changed, but actually some things have changed, and that he didn't think that like the party, he thought he was like, a moderate in the party, but then that McCain was too liberal for him. And he doesn't really explain how, like, what that means beyond that McCain sponsored some like tax legislation he didn't agree with. Okay. And then we get down to here, where I think this is important to read. We'll just actually read it through. While Donald Trump and John McCain are polar opposites as men, which is true, the forces driving the illiberal and nativist elements of the Republican Party were there the whole time. McCain did eventually tape this staged ad after all. The thing is, in 2008, I convinced myself that these forces were just the nuts out on the margins, while I was one of the good ones. But what do you mean by one of the good ones? What made you conservative? What made you a Republican? What I didn't realize but probably should have, was that these forces weren't as marginal as I thought, that I was enabling them, and that they were increasing in power within the party throughout the entire time I was a professional operative. Stuart Stevens covered it, but what it's like coming out to this just disturbing realization much better than I could have here in his recent book. And then we get into this important part. Anyway, when Donald Trump rode those forces to victory in 2016, it put me into a transitional period and made me rethink some things. It woke me up to some pretty gnarly stuff I was wrapped up in. And then we go on, talks about the bigotry that Trump has enabled. And then he talks about just this sort of like the gamification of media, or how he's feeling culpable for that. But what's confusing is, let's get to here. I'm just being real here. Who gives a F about the top marginal tax rate and WOTUS regulations when our actual democracy is under threat by a sitting president who is simultaneously trying to overturn an election and actively exacerbating a pandemic that has killed, however many Americans? All of these things I agree with, and I understand what he's coming from. But again, there's just this nagging feeling when you're reading this where it's like, well, yeah, Tim, I agree, but like, what made you a Republican? Like, there's still this missing thing the entire time. And then we get more here where he starts, roasting his colleagues. And then let's get to identity. Our identities are complicated and involving. And then he harkens back to how he's a homosexual or a gay man or whatever. And then he pulls from the fact that, he is a gay man himself, and that, of course, he understands identity, and we go into id poll stuff. Still really confusing on what this is, so here we go. We get maybe some more clarification. All these elements made removing being a, quote, Republican operative from identity pretty hard. GOP is in my damned LinkedIn profile name. Don't friend me, I can't take the email reminders. Throughout the Republican voters against Trump experience, I would find myself tearing up watching videos from people who talked about how being Republican was a central part of their identity and how hard it was for them to admit they were voting for a Democrat and losing this part of it. These people named their kids Reagan and had elephant tchotchkes scattered throughout the house. No longer being a Republican in good standing was a real loss. It's somehow Catholics felt after the sexual abuse scandal. How fans of indie bands feel when they can go mainstream. Which, by the way, what a beautifully horrible comparison or set of comparisons. Even internally, they don't even work. Like, and then we say this, but wow, such a loss can be melancholy. It can also be liberating. Uncle Rico is sad AF. Coming out of the closet was the best thing I ever did. Getting rid of the shackles of toxic identities gives you new perspectives and the freedom to be honest. You don't have to make excuses for stuff you know is wrong. You don't have to come up with the best possible interpretation for your side and the worst possible interpretation for the other side. This is true for me and many of my colleagues at the Bulwark. Do we even remember what this piece is about? This piece is called Goodbye to All of That, Leaving the GOP. Why is it still, so we're at this point, right? This article is almost done, and I still do not know what made Tim Miller a Republican aside from the capital L liberal talking points of Bob Dole, which he even acknowledges was incongruent with policy, and he knew that starting in his career. So that the Republicans said that stuff, but they didn't really seem to act it out. And there was also a lot of people on the margins who actually were more present than he thought that actually had the complete opposite views of him. We're getting a really confusing picture here. So let's try to read the closing out of the article and figure out what he's saying. Getting rid of the shackles of toxic identities gives you new perspectives and the freedom to be honest. You don't have to make excuses for stuff you know is wrong. You don't have to come up with the best possible interpretation for your side and the worst possible interpretation for the other side. Oh, I already read that. Whoops. So what does he say on this? I'm embracing this change. I'm shedding the GOP label for good. And while I'm at it, I'm also shedding the PR flack and strategist parts of my identity too, making the cable cryon writer's life difficult. After RVAT, I'm going out on top like Jordan. It's unclear at this stage if this is just my Birmingham Barons phase or something more permanent. I'll be sticking around the bulwark and possibly dabbling in some other writing and intermediate ventures. Maybe after the pandemic has abated, I'll just walk the earth, meet people, get into adventures like Kane and Kung Fu. Who knows? I guess that makes me a journalist now. New identities sound weird. Maybe writer or content man. I'm not sure. We don't have to put labels on it yet. Let's just enjoy. In the meantime, send scoops and ideas to me. So, excuse the horrific, the horrific millennial writing, whatever. Let's put this in context now. So this is the sort of Tim Miller we're getting at 2020. This sort of I'm leaving the Republican Party. This is when the bulwark was still, openly associated with being this kind of anti-Trump Republicans. So never Trump Republicans, but still Republicans. Isn't it weird how the article that Tim Miller made to explain why he was leaving the GOP and why he, is doing this new thing and he's uncertain of what the future holds, why is it that there's no indication in the entire article of why he was in the GOP? And why is it now today he's talking to people like Ben Rhodes uncritically and engaging with almost everything they're saying? I think maybe it's because Tim Miller was never a Republican. And what I mean by that is Tim Miller was a opportunist to his core. I don't know what personally led him into politics or what kept him in that domain. But when you read this article, you understand everything is hollow for him. When he talks about the benefits, the greatness of America, he can't nail it down beyond those grandiose and vague capital L liberal talking points that used to be associated with the uniparty-like construction of a neoliberal and neo-conservative dialectic, where ultimately you had similar principles being followed by both sides, and it was more about a policy distinction. And what's especially strange is he's not somehow able to mention, or maybe he doesn't know, that this sort of transformative era of the party that he's describing, these people on the margins that he describes, these people who he thinks were extremists, ended up to be the entire Republican Party, or to be represented by the entire Republican Party, when a lot of those people were part of the Democrat coalition just prior to Trump. A lot of these southern states had these sort of modern day Dixiecrat types who were very conservative, who were maybe extreme pro-lifers, who maybe had some very, caustic views when it came to immigration relative to the average in the Democratic Party. It was a big tent. It was a very big tent during those Obama years. That's why it was so difficult for him legislatively. A lot of those people converted to MAGA because of the openness in that. The idea that he, even to this day, kind of tells you this big lie of the GOP opening itself up to these margins, the margins being bigger than he thinks, instead of a transformational element of the country that was almost across party lines. It tells you what Tim Miller is, which is an activist, a propagandist, but for the most sanitized version of America, for the butterflies and rainbows of pluralism, of diversity, of acceptance of gay rights, of broad, sweeping, borderline, open borders-esque immigration, business, industry. But the whole point of politics is it's supposed to be more substantial than that. Like, you're supposed to actually have more to it, Like, if you're going to say, I was in the Republican Party because of the consensus of American idealism, what about that has to do with the Republican Party? What about that made you a Republican? I've still yet to see any examples from Tim Miller himself of what made him a Republican beyond him being hawkish on foreign policy sometimes, which he's completely retreaded. I mean, just the fact that he can talk to Ben Rhodes and uncritically just agree and nod and say yes to everything that he talked about regarding his, anti-hawkish advice to Obama, which arguably has created quite huge issues across the world, maybe even worse than a lot of the neocon disasters that was too interventionist. What was even there? So we don't really even have the immigration angle. We just have the taxes. And even then, what do we mean by that? There was plenty of Democrats at the time, the Blue Dog Coalition, that was incredibly scrupulous when it came to taxation. It was incredibly careful when it came to taxes, who were very conservative economically, but they shared all of the, values that Tim Miller alleges that he felt that he could see sometimes in people like Dole and Reagan, but they actually had the policy to back those up. So it wasn't like Tim Miller was a normal guy. This guy worked in politics. This guy ran Jeb Bush's campaign. What's so confusing to me is, what was the purpose of all of that? What was the angle? How do you have nothing to show for it ideologically? How is it so confused that I can read this article from 2020 that seemingly not a lot of people read, that tells you nothing about why you left the GOP, really? Like, because you even admit, well, these people were on the margins, blah, blah, blah. But why were you there in the first place? You don't even really have an answer, self-admittedly. I think that's sort of just the disaster of someone like Tim Miller, in that he does mean nothing. He is not critical. He is not intelligent even. He is just someone who is trying to, I don't even want to say grift, because grift requires more effort. He's made a job out of being a bystander who just sits there and nods and repeats platitudes. It's the ultimate worst version of a woke scold, in that he's not even strong enough to scold well. It's just confused, garbled nothingness. And maybe a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense immediately, but the more you think about someone like Tim Miller, the more you read, the more you understand, I think, that he is doing incalculable harm to the party. It's just, if you have people like this who are not principled, who don't have real applications, who are just these sort of wandering creatures, I don't know how you ever do transformative politics as popular, because this guy should creep anyone out who isn't just listening along. People who are being critical, people on the borders, or people who genuinely feel strong about their politics, because this guy is just a parasite. He is, what does he add? He is just this nothingness that was a barnacle under the GOP for as long as they could tolerate him, for, again, what purpose? And now in the Democratic Party, he's doing the same thing by inviting people like Hassan into the coalition, because he sees an allyship with someone like that, someone who is there for money and attention and influence, but without ideological convictions that can translate into real politics. So, very ranty, but yeah, that is why I despise Tim Miller, partially, just as an introduction to that. And I will be getting more into the problems of Tim Miller as time goes on. So let's do something else now. Ooh, I need some water. That's a lot of talking. Let's put these in a folder. Okay. Related to that, I want to go into something a little different now. I wanted to read about the Onion InfoWars stuff a little bit, because I thought it was a little curious, because I think there's actually some problems with it that are being unexplored partially. But oh my god, my eyes. So itchy. Stupid hair getting in my face, I I think. Sorry, I was checking. Wanted to check something on YouTube for a minute. Oh, there we go. First video since this relaunch has gotten 1,000 views. That's actually super sick. I've tried the YouTube thing a couple of times, and I really haven't been able to. I have not been able to break through really prior. So having my first video do, 100 times better than anything else I've done in the past is a good feeling. Same with the Hassan video, where I had a lot of I guess concern with that being taken more poorly, in the sense that it just wouldn't resonate with anyone. Like, I have no problem having a majority dislike video or getting hate comments, but I wanted to actually, I want people to have disagreement with it. I want people to get to really have a reason why they're even watching it, because it's super super helpful for me, because it lets me know that one, I might be saying something of value, but more importantly, it's just telling me that there's something to actually get at there. It's a little parasitic because you're talking to someone else, but I think there's something to it. And the onion, I wanted to read about the onion thing. I put it in the title even, so I thought it was oh my gosh, can you stop autofocusing? Bro, I have turned this autofocus setting off on this camera 3 times now, and it just doesn't matter. It keeps turning back on. Let me lean back in my chair without having this stupid camera just refocus it. Yeah, turn auto framing off. Let's see, is it? Thank you. Ugh. Stand up, just. Oh, my hair is such a mess. It's on there just taking InfoWars and repurposing it, so it's not even that interesting actually. That'd be more interesting. Taking a look around. Ask me something more interesting. I need some more comfortable clothing for this. um. Actually, I kind of wanted to read this too. I don't know if this is like useful, but I did want to read it. Trump is making this is recently. Tim O'Brien is very correctly. Oh, is this not who I thought he was? I thought Tim O'Brien was a bigger guy. Never mind. Actually, not understood. Oh, whoops! I didn't mean to do that though. Um. Hmm. Sorry for the delay. Oh, this is actually good to respond to. Sorry, I was pulling it up. Why is this Pop Stonox? So this is actually
100%.
as a hold on.
Arms and
As a precursor, I'm going to redo that. As a precursor to this clip, there's two different sides on this in terms of like the disposition where Hassan's coming from, where Hanway is coming from. But there's, before listening to this, you have to think about something, or I would ask you to think about something. What do you think funding the Iron Dome does? Just keep that in mind and we'll watch this.
do you believe that there should be a full arms embargo in Israel?
Absolutely. 100%.
There are many in Congress that have now chosen to make this distinction between defensive weapons and offensive weapons, or rather have decided to lean into no distinction between the two, but seemingly are using this as an opportunity to say, look, we won't pay for Israel to purchase these weapons, but we'll still sell these weapons. Do you feel like that goes far enough?
So I will say it's one of the dumber positions you can have, because all you're doing is just like that itself is just you're basically taking away your ability to have leverage against Israel while also still providing with the opportunity to purchase weapons. So they still have the access. You just have no leverage anymore on whether, you know, they can do certain things or not. So that is a dumb position compared to the alternatives. I agree with Hassan there.
In terms of restraining Israel?
It's not far enough. We first need to follow our own laws. You know, we are not supposed to be selling weapons, any kind of weapons, to any country that is breaking international humanitarian law, that is committing genocide or atrocities. And when we talk about the Iron Dome or any kind of defensive weapons, what it's doing, it's insulating Israel from having to make decisions to make peace.
So what's interesting about this, when he says decisions to make peace, he means just with Palestinians, but he's not including the other states, because what a lot of Israelis would say, and there's some merit to this, when did all of the peace with their neighbors occur? Was it mostly before the Iron Dome or afterwards? Were the normalizations with the Jordanians and the Egyptians and the Lebanese and the Gulf states before or after they had greater defensive capabilities? The truth is the better that Israel's gotten at defense, the more friendly their adversaries have been, because they figured, there's not much we can do here. Specifically with Egypt, you know, Egypt was trying to become this pan-Arab state that was going to sort of control North Africa and the Middle East. And part of the way they were going to demonstrate that was by conquering Israel. And when they failed to do so initially, the better that Israel got defense, the less interested Egypt was in trying to dominate there, because they knew they couldn't after a certain point, and it was fruitless. So they normalized relationships, and there's a reason for that. It's not random. So does it make it more likely that the Israelis will make a decision for peace the worse their defense is? Probably not. You're giving them more of a reason to fight, but let's see how he develops this.
And it really isolates them from like having to deal with the consequences.
Yeah.
It's like,
what consequences? Like, that's the thing, is like, if the consequences are increased, you know, attacks on their civilian population, why would they not just make them more aggressive? The best international conflict, if your might is capable of doing this, oftentimes the best defense is a proper offense. You know, you cut the stem before the flower grows. Part of the reason that they've been, you know, so hesitant to fully try to like take over and occupy and kick out everyone from the Gaza Strip and the West Bank is because they know there's no walking back from that. It would cut their connection with the West, and it would require a huge impetus from the population. And the population in Israel does not feel like it's necessary because they do have defensive measures currently.
giving a bully like body armor to go bully people some more. We need to be able to have them feel the effects of war and then they'll stop and they'll actually have a conversation.
Beyond that, do you support sanctioning the state of Israel?
Yes, like every other state. I mean, what makes it different than Russia or Iran in the case that we've talked about for years?
So something like this, again, I don't know if this guy's dumb or just malicious. You can have very negative opinions about Israel, but the major reason there's a difference is because Israel won qualitatively the types of immorality that you could accuse Israel of. It's 10 times worse with Iran and Russia. What he's stating again, it's an absurd false equivalency. But more importantly, to me at least, is this bizarre misunderstanding where no matter what you think about Israel, it's still a democratic parliamentary system. The reason why we sanction Iran and Russia is because the leadership is impossible to be, they can't be held accountable in any way domestically. In Russia, there is no check on the Putin regime that is external to the government. In Iran, there is no check to the Ayatollah. Like it doesn't exist. These are not democratic structures. Now, you can argue that there's not enough of a check so far in the Netanyahu government, but there are elections. There are Arabs in part of the parliament. Like there are left-wing parties. They do compete. They do have a competitive edge. They have been in power. There's a reason why you have different parts of history where Israel has been more willing to come to the table and negotiate. It's because there is a parliamentary, democratic dynamic that does change how they respond to certain things. So this idea that they're comparable to Russia or Iran, when again Iran is sponsored directly, paid for global terror. They have paid for terror. You can agree with those organizations, but to deny that they've paid for that, there is no comparable action from Israel. It just doesn't exist. Or with Russia, the invasion of Ukraine, a unprompted, completely random, not in response to anything invasion, where they have committed atrocities that Israel could not even, I don't even know if Israel could physically even do. Like you're never going to find the worst examples of IDF excess you could find are never going to be comparable to even just what Russia did in Mariupol. And again, you can be anti-Israel, but I think these are all facts. These are or at least as close as you can get to facts with moral claims.
If that's the case, what makes Israel so special that they don't have to abide by the rules?
And this question, what makes them special that they don't have to abide by the rules? 'Cause even if you, again, think that, it's because their circumstance is actually special. There are no other Western-style democratic systems of government that exist in regions where that doesn't exist. And they also have enemies on all sides who are launching constant invasions. Like, I think you can claim those invasions are valid, but do you think Japan would be this sort of wholesome Chungus neoliberal state if it had, missiles flying into their country from China every so often? No, it's just not what would happen. That's just the reality. The simple thing is that neoliberal systems or even baseline liberal systems, they really deal with threats seriously. They take threats seriously. Any form of a real government does this that's successful. Like it or not, Israel has been in a constant state of emergency basically since its founding. And again, you can think it's not a legitimate state. You can think it should be destroyed, but you can't just pretend like there aren't reasons why they are considered distinct and unique, because the conditions are distinct and unique. Again, critique however you want, but to lie about the underlying context, right? Because them being unique doesn't change any opinion for a lot of these people. A lot of pro-Palestinian people who want to abolish Israel, destroy Israel, the Israeli situation being unique or legitimately democratic does not change any of those facts. But if you lie about them, it does, because, well, now you're just a dishonest actor, in my opinion.
That everyone else does.
Do you believe?
Look, man, I'm sorry it's boring. A lot of it is boring, I agree. But as interesting to me. Maybe it's not interesting to you, but maybe there's no market for it. Maybe I do a handstand instead or something. but yeah, it's this sort of interview is like a very, I don't know. I think these dynamics are interesting to me because, these are the ways that our politics are changing. These are the way that these conversations are going to change for the foreseeable future. And it's real. It's not just online anymore. It's like actual politics. You have like actual politicians saying this stuff. That's fair. Look, dude, honestly, actually, you know what? I'm gonna be that guy. I don't know if cartoons are cool anymore. Is Cartoon Network cool anymore? I'm not even sure. I can't lie. I have no idea if it actually is cool because I feel like that the last time I saw Cartoon Network, dude, it was just that show Teen Titans Go. Like, that was like 10 years ago at this point, probably. But like, I feel like they stopped airing all their cool shit. Like, you had Chowder and stuff back in the day, which is awesome. But, is it actually like, is it real anymore? Do they actually have programming? I feel like all that stuff kind of got wiped out. Maybe I can just restream the last 2 Smiling Friend episodes. No, you're right about that. Yes. Well, I can be, just to be honest, one, when you're, a lot of my streaming stuff, I've been streaming to make long form video content on YouTube, which does perform significantly better than the streaming stuff. But I agree that Klein Hassan is bad, but I feel like I gotta be honest, I actually don't have much of an issue with Hassan, like himself. Like, he's kind of dumb and he's edgy or whatever, but like, I think Hassan's more like interesting if you use him as like the people he talks to talk about like what to more focus on the way that people interact with him, because Hassan's like an activist. Not even, dude. His life is awesome. I mean, he seems kind of unhappy, but think about how much money Hassan makes and how little he has to do to like make that money. Like, there's no accountability. Which again, you can't blame him. Like, dude has a pretty awesome situation going. I think the more real lesson, at least for me, is that like people should be taking more seriously how people talk to him. No, that's, yeah. No, the people who follow him, yeah, sure. I wouldn't disagree with that. Well, think about it like that though. It's like, why did iDubbbz follow Hassan? It's because I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Hassan is like an activist, and he's really good at it, but he has like an angle, and part of it's being attractive, part of it's having, good voice. He knows how to entertain people, but if you try to like emulate him, there's no one's done it successfully yet. Like, that's. But I'm more talking about like the people who talk to him outside of like the Twitch sphere or whatever. Like, he's cautionary tale in that respect, where like if you try to be him like iDubbbz, like you're not gonna get close. Like, I don't even know, does anyone exist like him? Like, I feel like Hassan's the only popular person. Yes, I mean, does he even have? But the weird thing too, does he have orbiters even? Like, I know like he literally does, but it's kind of weird where it's like, they don't even, like, he never invites them on his streams. He never boosts their content. He never like, tells people when they're streaming or watches any of their content. It's really bizarre. Like, they're almost like I don't know why you would even be a. You're probably right. I mean, but how do they all suck? There has to be a couple of them that are just hiding, or that are unpopular, that he just doesn't want to boost because maybe he doesn't want to share the limelight. But like, you're right, he's a cautionary tale in that respect, but like, I mean, part of that's also like, he's just like he does what he does well. Like, you can't get mad, I feel like, about that part. Like, he's really effective. Clearly, he wouldn't have stuck around for so many years, Like, I remember like just even back in the Among Us days, I thought he was super boring and annoying, but like, I mean, bro has been around for how long at this point? Like, is this sorry, I'm changing the right thing. He's been around for like, gotta have been like 6 to 7 or 8 years or something like that. Cause like, man, like, I don't know. But yeah, I don't even care. Like, I think people dunk on Hassan too much because they think it's I don't know, easy or something. But like, Hassan's like, yeah, probably like 2018. You're probably right. Yeah, he's had staying power. but I like again, like I can't get you can't hate like I think when people dunk on Hassan like as himself, it's kind of like hating the player, not the game thing where Hassan says and does crazy shit, but like, dude, again, like, why wouldn't you if you can get away with it? Like when you shock your dog, which even like who even cares? Like, but when you shock your dog live on stream like multiple times, and it's like obviously you did it, and you have real shooters who are going to defend you for like literally months and months and months, defying all logic, just like lying aggressively, and you don't even do anything to help their careers, and they'll still do it for you. Like, you've tapped into something there. Like, you are not the problem. The problem is, you know, the people who are uncritically supporting that. There's Welsh Destiny, the SS. Yeah, that's fair actually. Yes. Well, I think part of the issue is they're not like, you're right, they're also the other like big left creators who are available, but like it's so different. They're all like different types of left. Like when you go to the like popular right, like on Twitch, like the Asmongold or whatever, like these are all MAGA guys, like love or hate them, you know, like they might have some disagreements here and there, but they're pro MAGA. But like Hassan, Vaush, and Destiny all have like completely different like ideologies. They're totally different people. They all support different things. Like you're right, Vaush and Destiny are off-putting. I don't know if Vaush is, but I know Destiny's banned from Twitch. Vaush might be as well. But like, I don't know. It's just kind of weird. There's no one that like Hassan could platform, because I feel like at a certain point it must be difficult to not have like a real orbiter structure or whatever. But I don't know. And also, to be fair, I think Destiny does really well on short form content. Yeah, you're right about that. Well, you say that, but part of it is that like when you talk about like the MAGA stuff, the unifying factor is Trump 100%. But like even if Trump goes away, I think there's a lot of like commonality that these guys can still find. But like with Bernie, from memory, like maybe back in the day would have been this, but say you had another Bernie pop up today, Hassan would think they aren't going far enough. Vaush should support them, and then Destiny would not support them probably, because that's how different they all three of those are. So I think it's a pretty different like, I think it's a different like ecosystem to have. But I mean, he's doing something that works. Like there's a reason why like no one has been able to challenge him at all. But what I was saying before I read that comment was like again, like I think Destiny kills it on like Instagram Reels. Like, I don't use Reels too much for like politics content. I just get like horrific, like evil memes on it. But I've seen before, like I think on like TikTok and like Reels, I think Destiny does better than Hassan. He just doesn't convert probably. Maybe that's not being on Twitch. I have no idea. But Hassan absolutely destroys like the streaming. I don't know if he bots, but doesn't he get like 35K viewers? Like if even it's like 20K real people, it's crazy. No, they're not. I disagree with them a lot. I'm very entertained by Haas and Hinkle. They're actually really interesting guys. Hinkle a little less so because he's like an actual like, I don't know if he believes anything, but like that video, God, let me see if I can find it. I don't want to pull up. I don't know if you've ever seen this video of Hinkle talking in, I think it was Yemen, and it's like, let me see if it's the right video. It shows the crowd. I think it was this. Yeah, dude, this is crazy. This is so crazy. Yeah, 100%. Haas is a really smart guy. Haas has written books that are like substantial and real, and like he knows like political philosophy through and through. Like that was my bread and butter for a long time before I was trying to do content. Like I was super into that angle of it, and like. You can go back. There's like videos of Haas, I think, talking to Destiny, talking to Weirdo, other random people. And he does crush them like philosophy wise. It's like crazy. He's like a really smart dude. But he'll like lie about stuff, but do it very intelligent. Like I've seen him debate Lyshenkoism, where he's pro Lyshenko, who's the guy who caused the great famines from the USSR. This video of Hinkle, first of all, what a great amount of a comedic level of microphones. Like, look at the amount of people he's speaking to. It's crazy, dude. That's like, look at this, bro. Oh my God. Yeah, Haas is. Yeah, I agree. He's a crackpot. He's crazy. I don't know how much of Haas's stuff is him being honest or kind of driving the line, but like he is a super thoughtful dude when it comes to what he's actually saying. I think he's not super. And one of the things I love or I respect a lot about Haas is that like he's not rhetorically effective at all, which is really a bizarre position. It's a bizarre way to act when you're trying to be a real politician. Like, he has like a real position in the American Communist Party now. He actually does. I think he might be the president actually now, but he does real life campaigning for them constantly. He's Justin was recently in China. What am I streaming? Oh, it's not popping up on my screen. I have a kick stream open as well. That I'm talking to a guy in there. I don't know why it's not going on my overlay, but I can put the chat link in the chats if you want to see that stuff too. Yeah, he's definitely a marginal figure in that respect. But yeah, he's marginal in a way that is like very concerning if you like are against that stuff, because when you're not good at rhetoric, intentionally so, because you're trying to deliver like salient points to like true believer types, like people take this for granted. But, like part of the reason why I think someone like Hassan is not as like damaging or whatever as people say is that he like Hassan does not have much motion as he would say, in that like I don't think you could take 10,000 Hassan fans and get much done, but if you have 100 Haas fans, you could probably get like serious political action done, especially at like a local level. Like it's pretty insane to think about all the work you can get done with that many people. Like I'm trying to remember, what was the initial, how many people were involved? Bolshevik. Sorry, really bad typos there. But I'm pretty sure like the Bolshevik Revolution, like, was it only like 20,000 people who like pulled it off? Yeah, dude. Like I'm pretty sure like in the initial stages, it was compared to the amount of resistance, like physical resistance they were facing, like you had not as nearly as many people as you would think. I mean, it grew pretty quickly, obviously, but I don't know, man. Like it's, yeah, I don't know if it'll win people over. You're right, but it's more of a question of like, can they do things like as they develop, literally, as in like part of the problem with something like Haas is that there is no like formal political structure for communists really in America. Like the American Communist Party is a joke. And for Haas's credit, I think he was banned off of most platforms for a while. I think Hassan tries to incite people to commit violence on behalf of his rhetoric. You're probably right, but like it's not like effective violence. Even that's the worst part. Like it's more just like it's like safe, edgy violence. Like he's saying that because like Hassan uses the aesthetics of violence in a way that is like always like socially acceptable. Like when he posted that picture of the what is it called? That like 3D printed gun that someone used to kill the prime minister of Japan. I guess at that point he's ex-prime minister, Shinzo Abe, and he posted that under Rick Scott's account. It's like that's obviously calling for violence, and like it's I'm sure I got like an FBI call or something, but like it's safe edgy. Like it's similar to like the Luigi stuff. Like it's all safe edgy violence. He would never ever advocate for violence in a way that wouldn't be seen as socially acceptable by like LA socialites or whatever. He sits there all day saying crazy shit, just hoping someone is crazy enough to do something. No, I disagree with that part. I think he would never want to be associated with his name. Like, because at the end of the day, Hassan is he's a champagne socialist, not like even like a bad way. I just mean like his goal is comfort, realistically. Again, the aesthetics of violence are useful, but never when they're so close to home that you could have it, use on yourself. There's been other comedy orgs throughout the country's history, far more popular ones. It's ultimately harmless. I predict Haas's group follows a similar path. Probably, yeah. I think actually what's more, maybe not more likely, but like there's a weird like dynamic right now where like a lot of people, a lot of different groups are all primed to become like full on China, not simps, but people who can actually like, you just want America to clear the way for China. Yeah, the Rick Scott cons are insane. Yeah, like these are like again like but they're safe edgy. I don't think he actually wants people to do it and then cite him. He just wants the aesthetic of it, but he knows his fans are not going to do stuff like that again because it would like if that ever happened, he would actually have like the risk of being deplatformed, and I don't think he would want that. But so what I was in the China thing, like I was reading this recently. It was funny. There was I didn't go on this, but I was talking to someone recently on Twitter about this, where like they were discussing how like there used to be like a fascist board on 8chan, like it was specifically a fascist board, and it was like interesting compared to a lot of like fascist spaces online because like it was a like primarily pro Spain and Italian fascism board where these people idolized a lot of the successes there or whatever, or the ideology, but they were extremely anti-Nazi because they felt like Nazism was a total failure, morally bad, whatever. And it was funny because I think he was saying that as that board kind of came to its end, they just all became like CCP status. Like that was their entire, because they realized that like the closest they would have to something like that is in contemporary China. And there's so many different groups that if you align them enough, if you give them the right rhetoric, or if you let them organize in the right ways, like they would all, there's a huge like potential for there to be like even if it was just like a caucus in Congress, but like an attempt to have America step out of the way or whatever. I'd hope seditious actors trying to turn the USA into a big Temu factory will face legal scrutiny. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I agree with that too. Obviously, yeah. The problem is you have to make it like politically tangible, right? Like that's part of the issue. I think that a lot of people find is that like even if you agree that there's all this underlying like powder keg energy for seditious activity that could undermine American liberalism to an extreme degree, like no one has the balls to deal with it. Like, dude, I don't know if you guys have seen this before, but there is I think it's in Florida. It's either mandarins or peaches or something. They no longer are able to grow them due to a bacteria or a virus of some sort that was allegedly imported from China. And they're just done now. Like they're not able to actually, they won't grow. And there's been accusations of bioterrorism from China. And there's been multiple instances, even just the past 2 years, where people in, foreign nationals from China have come in and brought with them different types of what we consider like bioweapons that are strains of different weeds or strains of different bacteria that could destroy local ecosystems for certain crops or whatever. And I've seen that like that's happened like multiple times, and like there's like literally zero political impetus to deal with that seriously. Like there's no like it goes back to like the similar situation now where you have like I don't know how to fix this, by the way. I'm just saying this is part of the problem. People don't only want to acknowledge the problem. Like you have an industry in China still where, my God, the Chinese are squandering our goodwill. Yeah, honestly, yeah. Like they're serious, brother. They have things on lock. Like oh God, there's this really cool movie. I really highly recommend. It's a documentary. It's called Petition. God, the Chinese are such an interesting people. I guess I can pull up the Wikipedia for it. This is such an interesting movie. It was about this city in China that no longer exists. They actually literally destroyed it, and you can see like the movie starts with you seeing the city destroyed. Where this was a city where people who had made legal petitions to Beijing primarily about different like injustices that they had faced legally or appeals or whatever would go. Like they would collect here. And I pull up some of the images from it. Like it was horrible. It was like these like shantytown like conditions, but like the reality was like it's something that Americans would never put up with. But like, the Chinese for whatever reason had this ability to withstand that. And they're able to, form, extends their entire political I guess like ladder system can develop in such complicated ways like that. Like I was saying, like prior to that, like here's an example of like a shot from that movie. I'm always care about Google. I'm always spooked by Google search results when it comes to stuff like this, because I don't want it to get like saying it's like, you know, TOS violating or whatever. They what's the word? There's an entire industry in China where you can pay to have an agency organize travel around a pregnancy, where they can, you know, get you set up with a visa, accommodations, and travel, so you can go to the United States, have your child. The child becomes a citizen, and you go back. You know, I forget what the term they call that. It's not anchor baby. It's more distinct. It's like something tourism or whatever. But like, you know, if you have a country that's competent and as large and as committed as China, and you have a system like that happening in America, like, you know, that system is like you're in building like something equivalent to sedition, right? Like you're in building something that is that is not sustainable. Like it's not something you can actually deal with. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, that's why I can't get mad at people like Hassan, because like it's not his fault, right? Like he's just kind of playing the system. It's not doing anything illegal, but no one will make the kind of things that he might do illegal, or at least go after. I mean, again, like there's to a broader point, the one thing I can say that like does frustrate me about people like Hassan is that like it's kind of crazy how like we just all know, like, everyone who like follows media sees this, like the Republican media does not give a damn about him. Like they really do not care about the sort of things he says. Like when you look at Hassan's behavior and see how it's covered in like a Fox News article or something, or a Fox News segment, it's followed in such a way that when they report on it, it's a Democrat saying that, not Hassan Piker. You know, regardless of the fact that Hassan is illiberal, right? So he's not even really a member of a Democratic Party spiritually. It's more formally that he is. So like you have something like that occur. You have this like actual real guy who's like, I am a Marxist, I'm not a liberal, blah, blah, blah. He says stuff like this, doesn't get deplatformed. In fact, still is able to make money from it while being on the platform. And it's painted as a Democrat saying that, right? And not as someone who's an illiberal activist. Then meanwhile, you'll have like actual liberal, you know, figures, someone like a Destiny, who is still demonetized, who J.D. Vance personally tried to have taken off of YouTube. I mean, again, like there's a lot of faults that Destiny has, whatever, but like that's kind of crazy to think about how someone who is like probably 3 to 4 times the size of Hassan is able to take advantage of this ecosystem in that way, because he knows Republicans have no issue with him. They want to platform him. It's so useful because Hassan is like a perfect scapegoat for like actual, you know, liberal criticism or whatever. Like think about it like this: like if I didn't follow politics at all and I just had like normal American views, like if I heard Hassan, the things he says on like a news clip or something, and I was told, you know, this represents like 40% of a Democratic Party, like how could you ever associate yourself, you know, with that group? Like if I hear a guy talking about how he wants to expropriate capital, or how he's like a harm reductionist voter, so he won't vote for, you know, Kamala Harris, but he would vote for Hamas over Israel, which is a real thing he said on Pod Save America just this like week, I think. Like that's crazy. Like that's a really interesting dynamic where it's like it's a sort of thing where like you'd imagine that at some point like capital would get involved. Like and that's something I've actually struggled with too, where I don't understand why it works that way, but there's clearly something to it, which is that like, you know, I'm not a capital reductionist at all. I think there's a lot of things that go into, you know, decisions regarding business or whatever that are more cultural or more intentional in certain ways. But like there's something really confusing to how at every point when you think there would be, you know, a reason for big business to intervene and to shut someone down, or to sort of like, you know, make the media environment more monoculture based, more normal, more or less accessible to certain types of rhetoric. It just doesn't happen. Like, you go back to like the 1950s or even just the entire mid-century, you have this general media consensus because where are you going to hear news? It's in a newspaper, or it's going to be on one of 4 television channels. And, there's all these standards being upheld just because of the nature of there being less people that can compete and, less social change happening quickly. So certain types of rhetoric, certain lies, certain whatever are just, seen as not acceptable or whatever. And that starts disappearing with the emergence of more and more media culture, but no one steps in, right? It can't be good for capital to have someone like Hassan Piker running around, or even like a Haas or Jackson Hinkle, like you mentioned earlier, Kick Chatter. Like, it can't be good for capital, yet it keeps going somehow, right? It keeps moving, it keeps working that way. And I don't know, I feel like at some point, like, there has to be like a serious like introspection moment where it's like, there's a reason why people are doing things that way. There's a reason why these people aren't being challenged in a certain way, and why other people like a Destiny are. Like, again, love him or hate him, like, there's a reason why someone like Destiny is being, like, you're having the vice president of the United States, J.D. Vance, personally try to get him deplatformed or not. Sure, they can have an introspection behind bars. I mean, like, there's a partial joke with that, but it's also like, the reality is, like, I think those people are gonna win, bro. Like, I think they're gonna win. I don't want them to, but like, I think like that sort of like, even if someone like Hassan doesn't carry the torch, like, there's going to be like I don't know what you would call it, like a Luigi Mangione Democrat that like keeps emerging. That's going to become, I think, dominant, even if they're not the most popular Democrat. Those might be the people who are the most politically motivated, the ones who are most willing to do things in real life. Like, think about like Luigi Mangione himself, dude. Like, what was he being radicalized by? Like, who are the people that he was being, like propagandized by to do such a violent action? It's not Hassan Piker. It's not Karl Marx. It's not, leftist radicals from like Spain. It was like Joe Rogan and like Andrew Huberman and like that guy Tim whatever. Like, it was bro podcasters who were like in a very broad sense just forwarding anti big business populist language. Like, even the very like the decision criteria for him, like the reason why he went after the United Healthcare guy was because United Healthcare has an unusually high amount of claim denials for prior authorizations. And at first it sounds like, oh, that's pretty bad. Like, if you're gonna like assassinate someone, you'd imagine you'd look into it like a little bit more than that. And again, like, if you spend like half a second Google searching, what you find out is, there's not much necessarily to claim denial in that. And it sounds weird, but certain healthcare providers, insurance providers might have really high claim denials, but it's not because, or might have very low claim denials, but it's because everything has to be done in network. So I think an example of that is Kaiser, where I think for Kaiser, you have to do everything in network to an absurd degree. And it makes it so that, like, on paper, it looks like, oh, they must offer really wide coverage because their claim denial is so low. And it's not because of that. It's because, they have a much more in-network program. But again, even that doesn't say much about the quality of their healthcare. It just says that is how they do their business side thing. And I think United is the opposite, where there's broader ability to do things, but there's more, more run-ups you can have with having initial denial, but if you appeal it, it doesn't, it won't be denied, whatever. But the whole point is that, like, there's clearly something more complicated in this situation. And even strangers, like, who's the guy he assassinated? It wasn't the CEO of United, who's like a real decision maker. It was the CEO of United Healthcare, right? The subsidiary. And when you look at the guy he assassinated, like the background of the guy came from working class means. This is a guy who made something of himself, whatever, and risen the ranks in this program. But the point of me going on that, like, going through all of that is like, I think it's a super. Have you not paid attention in the last 10 years? The far left got more depraved over time, not less. It went from cancel culture to shooting people. Yeah, no, 100%. It's a huge part of it. But it's not just about being depraved. It's like the motivations are becoming much more strange. Like when people do, like when they go from canceling, it's like when people discovered the hippies could kill when the Manson murders happened. Yes, but I think the important thing was that got reduced. It's like not to say that it stopped, but like it's like people forget how much political violence got reduced in America for a while. Like it was very common, right, in the Gilded Age. It remained pretty common even through the early mid-century. And then when you get to the fallout of like the hippie years and Vietnam, you start having less political violence, significantly so, and you start having this sort of like crazy consensus culture where people are much more not relaxed, but there's these vague appeals to commonalities and whatever. I was talking about that earlier on my stream regarding people like Tim Miller. There's no way like people like Hassan would win in the end. These people aren't having kids, and eventually all the safe, edgy content phase will die in a generation or two. That's hopeful. I mean, I think definitely there's an angle for that 100%. Like when you say they're not having kids, but that is a huge part of it. But it's like, who is having kids? It's the kind of people that are going to be more susceptible to Hassan Piker type characters. Like a really interesting demographic thing that you can look into. There's certain districts that don't go into this, but if you look at some of the higher income districts that voted for Obama in 2008, Romney in 2000, or maybe it's just Romney in 2014 or whatever it was, or not 2012, and then eventually Kamala Harris in 2024, you'll find that like these are, the traditional conservative Americans, the WASP Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and those are the people who aren't having kids, right? I mean, they're already replaced basically. Like all the areas that used to have those people are now, it's a lot of like, it's like, Jewish, Italian, Irish, like, and then like and even those people aren't having many kids. Like I think the problem is when you look at like who are having kids, these are the people who are most predisposed to a lot of the populist language. Like this is not the first populist moment in America, but our demographics are not built to like be less populist over time. Consensus is good. The issue is everyone has their own truth now. Yeah, that's a huge part of the issue. I agree with that. Like consensus is the bedrock of American politics, right? Like you don't do democracy well without consensus because part of consensus is that it's come to after like reasoning, after rationalization. It's not immediate. Like and sometimes it doesn't even go with the popular message because it's oftentimes just tradition or a thing you do. And a democracy, a liberal democracy, tries to, thread the needle between consensus being, resilient to change, but also being able to change when it needs to. But I think the problem is, like, where do you have consensus without a monoculture? Like, that's what gets me stuck, which is like in the past, there's all these mechanisms where, like, if you have a problem with the way the consensus was in like the 50s or even like the 1830s or the 1820s, there are real people at the top who can change, right? In that, like, the tastes of people can change, like the elites or whatever can change. Like, what elite person prior to maybe like 10 years ago would want someone like Hassan to be around? Like, in the past, to be a Hassan-like figure, you need patrons, right? Like, why did Karl Marx even get popular in the first place? It's because he had a rich elite intellectual, but also businessman, namely Engels, who could fund it, who could distribute it. That's not a great example of the sort of like patron system working, or the what would the word be, like recommendation system, this sort of a consensus being formed kind of top down. But it's also how you get America, right? It's also how you get the Lockean impulse. It's also how you get the you know, the transition from, you know, feudalism to something more productive, or even culturally, like in a dumber sense, like when you think about like, subversive movies, you know, that might have moved the needle in Vietnam, like things like, you know, the first Rambo movie, First Blood, Apocalypse Now or whatever, like you're still having to greenlight those. You're still having to have people at the top say what is and isn't okay. Hassan being around people in political office would be like if a bunch of beatniks hung around JFK. I don't know about that actually. I'd have to think about that for a minute. Because that's like, here's the difference, I think. The beatniks are like, or a lot of those mid-century groups, like they're aesthetic groups. Like their disposition and background and what they're sort of advocating for is aesthetic based. Like, you know, for someone like Hassan, he has real tangible things. Like an example being, he is 1000% helping to move the needle on how politicians can and will talk about Israel. Well, think about it and think about it hard. I am thinking about it hard. It's really complicated. Like I was watching this clip earlier on the stream. I don't know if I have it up anymore. Like I talk through things before they percolate, you know. Sometimes it can be helpful to talk through something when you're trying to think. I was watching a clip earlier where I was talking to this guy who's a New Jersey. Oh yeah, that's the clip I think you came in when I was just done talking about it. I had it on the screen still. It was him talking to that candidate from New Jersey. And it's like, you know, that's like a real change he's having in that the guy is giving this like psycho, or not even psycho, but just extremely confusing answer if you take it out of context, where he's like, what is he asking for? He's like, he wants to not only, you know, remove Israel from any sort of aid recipient list, but also to embargo them. And it's like on its own, there's nothing wrong with that opinion. Like there's a reasonable calculus that could take you there, but like, why does he want to do it? And it's like, because he wants them to like face the consequences, and to then they'll make them negotiate and go to peace. And it's like, that comes from a Hassan position. Like that is a sort of thing where like the people that Hassan represents, the people he influences, that's the kind of idea that comes about through those groups of people. But like functionally, it's like illiterate. Like if you're anti-Israel and you like want to know how to harm Israel, like you go and look at the history and like what happens to Israel when they quote unquote face the consequences, meaning that civilians are unable to, you know, be defended by the Iron Dome. Like a lot of people die. But like, is it enough to like topple the regime? Like, no, this is a nuclear power at this point. Like they're not going away like that. But what they would do is they would have less tolerance, right? And that like, if you're anti-Israel and you make it so that Israel is not only completely cut off from the United States in terms of aid, meaning you have far less leverage over them, but then you also embargo them, like one, they're going to find weapons from someone else. Like there's going to be someone that steps in who doesn't give a shit about any of this sort of, like the moral politics of it. But more importantly is that like, you're just inspiring them to go harder, right? Like, you know, for whatever problems you have with Israel, like there's still a democracy. And part of the reason why that there's this like hilarious like balancing act that Netanyahu has to do where he's like on a tightrope having to balance the coalition he's built of like ultra far right Israelis like Smotrich, and you know the entire rest of the political dynamic to prevent having his government taken over by a you know, a left-wing coalition that has failed to establish for basically so long now because of security. You know, if you make the security situation that much worse, where you have like thousands of Israelis dying in barrages from like Hezbollah or whatever because there's no Iron Dome anymore, there's not enough munitions to cover it. Well, first of all, the first group of people that die are Arabs because the Iron Dome already, you know, when they run low on munitions in between like depot runs or whatever, they protect Arab neighborhoods less, and those are the people who die first. But if you have like significant Israeli deaths, I mean, look at, you know, October 7th had like how many people died? It was like a couple thousand or maybe under 2,000 people. Like that's still horrific, but like, you know, if that was enough to get them to go and do, you know, the war they did from October 7th or October 8th, I guess, like to, you know, the relatively recent ceasefire, like, can you imagine what they would do? if there's no Iron Dome, bro, they go hard as hell. Even if like they eventually, succumbed at one point, like they're not like stupid. But that's what I mean. Where it's the Hassan disposition, where if you're following, say there's no Hassan wing, say there's no representation of that type of left wing voter. I don't know if you have politicians come about and say things like, we need to sanction Israel. Like, I don't know if you get that, because that doesn't even, like, if you think about it for like more than a minute, it doesn't even line up with an anti-Israel position. You're like, that's like, so an example being, which is funny, when you listen to, like, if you wrote down the prescriptions of what Hassan wants to do in Israel, like what he wants America to do to Israel that's like tangible, and that like he wants to sanction, cut off aid or whatever, they're the same exact things that the far right in Israel demands. They're the same things that the constituents from Smotrich demand, because they call them golden handcuffs. They call it the thing that's keeping us back. Like, realistically, like, people like Smotrich, I think he's even said before that, the Iron Dome is a blessing and a curse, and that like he feels like it limits the Israeli right's ability to, campaign on decisive military action, because they know that people feel safe enough, or it's too far. They won't support it. There's only so much they can do when people feel safe enough. And so when you have an anti-Israel politics forming in America, like, I think it's like you do get like some like real like kind of like epic schizophrenia developing in like left-wing coalitions because of people like Hassan. Maybe not exactly because of Hassan, but like it's that kind of person. So like to say like it's like, that it's just kind of like beatniks or whatever, I don't know. I think it's much more tangible, because beatniks didn't have real policy prescriptions. They're like, we want to end war. We want peace. We want housing. We want affordability, like basic populism. Like, and maybe you had in some moments, like with Vietnam, you had some more clear demands. But like with Sung Hassan, you have like, or Hassan and his ilk, you have actual, like the word would be like prescriptions. Like you have real tangible things that you can actually like do, and without much work, right? Like that's a huge thing for me too. Is it like, for some of that stuff, it wouldn't be even hard. Like when I think about even like small forms of like expropriation, right? If you had enough Democrats in power who align with that stuff, you could have borderline, property expropriation, legislation that passes. Like, it's totally possible. Or you could have something like court packing in such a way where, like, all it takes is one. Like, if you had an actual true representative, like presidential candidate for that Hassan wing of the Democratic Party, then you could have that. That could be the person that finally does court packing. That could be the person that finally changes everything. Like, it's a little. I think it is serious. I think the Hassan thing is a little more serious than that, but not because he's like some like genius himself, but rather because I think, what's the word? Because I think that there's a lot that can be lost. There's a lot that can actually change very quickly. Like even with like MAGA, I think an important distinction of that is like when I think about Trump, when I think about how did he get into power, it wasn't because the majority of the Republican Party was MAGA. It was that enough was, and they were motivated enough. Like that's the huge thing to me, where it's like, once you have that motivation, once you have that sort of like joy de vivre, where like you have people who feel good, who feel great, who feel inspired, and who are willing to actually, get that stuff in motion. I think it's really difficult to try to see a way out of that. I think it is just sort of like how it goes. I think it is just sort of unstoppable to an extent. But I don't know. If you have any thoughts on that, anyone who might be listening still, then be happy to hear it. But I think there was a video I had open that I was going to listen to, I thought, but maybe not. Oh, I gotta get some water, actually. I was basically talking for 50 minutes straight. I gotta get some water. I'll be right back. Let me go. I should probably turn my light on. It's getting dark in here. I need a ring light, dude. Lighting in my room is fucking horrific. Okay. I will be right back for anyone who's here. Forgot I was muted. Whoops. I my issues with Andrew Wilson are pretty simple, honestly. Forgot I was muted. Whoops. I think I mentioned it earlier, but the issue with like Andrew Wilson is that on a fundamental level, a lot of what he says makes sense. And like on principle, I agree with a lot of like broader, I guess you call them like philosophical ideas and like some like destiny. But the application is like so screwed up where it's like, so like Andrew Wilson will say like, you know, there's a benefit, you know, a societal importance even to things like, what's the word? Like the nuclear family, or elements of social cohesion to like being around people that are like you, like how hegemony like can be super helpful for pro-social things. And that's how you have a good society that develops, or that you can't really have strong morality without God or Christian morality, whatever. And there's like a lot of like analogs you can pull to that sort of thought. Where like with that guy Christopher Hitchens' brother, Peter Hitchens, who and Dawkins, who were for so long these very extreme, you know, atheist types. And they've all come around to saying like, well, no, I call myself now a cultural Christian because I realize that like a lot of those theological ideas are so baked into like what we think is good about the West that it's hard to decouple them. And you can decouple them, like, you know, to a lot of people's credit, like it's not necessary. You know, you don't have to be a victim to that. But it's not easy to do that. So like someone like Andrew Wilson does make a good argument for that. But then it's like, you know, where is it lived through? Like that's my whole problem with stuff like that. Is it has to be shown in the way that you actually live and talk to people. Like when you're going off about how someone's like an OnlyFans whore, or like that clip of him like talking to that lesbian woman, and when she brings up his family situation, he's like, "You like sniz." It's like when you're that kind of person, like it's just the question you would always have is like, what use are things like Christian morality if that's the product? Or what use is it to say, you know, the Western world is so good because it was created upon Christian fundamentals, and then you're at the same time saying things like you need to vote for the Republican Party, a party that is possessed, to put it lightly, by like this rabid, almost like anti-Christian Christianity, which is divorced from any of the theological stuff that Andrew Wilson talks about, or divorced from any of the, you know, bigger picture ideas. And it's like, bro, like, I don't know, like it's crazy. And on a more personal level, and I don't know if you agree with this, Mr. Goathead, but I really dislike the style of debate that Andrew Wilson does. It's something I have like very little tolerance for. It's where he gets so, and it's I think part of the reason I have so little tolerance for it is because unlike a lot of people, like my background and interest is in a very similar area of philosophy that someone like Andrew Wilson exists in, and that area is this like sort of not explicitly phenomenology, but like this sort of emphasis on really the Republican Party would be a better vehicle for the ideals than the Democratic Party. Though I don't know, that's the issue. Like, I understand what you're saying, like on principle, and you know, I think there's actually a way you can resolve what you're saying and what I'm saying, or in the sense that like there's a way that you can say, hey, you know, at the end of the day, the Republican Party is a better vehicle, but then you have to do the work of calling out the asymmetry, right? You have to say, look, it's a better vehicle, but here's where I disagree. With my understanding, like Wilson's like all on board with that stuff. An example being like, I think it's impossible withstanding, you know, the necessary resources. Like, so you can't just like, you know, you can't have this like appear out of thin air. But I think it's impossible to have an extreme interest in what's it called? In Christian ethics, and then you're like this weirdo, like maximalist on individualism when it comes to like healthcare or whatever. And then you say, well, your local community and church should provide for that. Like the reality is a lot of people like won't have that. So it's like the idea that you would like the ethics would be, I think, like in a country of abundance, you have to try to figure out how do you have better social safety nets, but do not rely on communities that might not come out for that person. Or a person that perhaps, you know, doesn't deserve community, or not, that doesn't deserve community, excuse me. Or someone that doesn't have community because perhaps they lived, you know, a sinful life. Perhaps they are repulsive in a lot of ways to their friends and family. Like the Christian answer would still be to provide, you know, a hand out to those people. But I mean, I know what you're saying. It's just that I've never heard him give that example, and he doesn't extol the virtues. He doesn't like seem to like care about them. Like it's the idea where, again, like if you have those goals and those ambitions, they should be realizable in some way. An example being of where I think you could argue this is that like if you are, you know, if you truly believe abortion is murder, like a lot of Catholics have to, you might get into a situation where you can't morally vote for the Democratic Party. Like I understand it completely. Like, you know, you'd be that'd be like your like one, you know, issue you're voting on. But it makes sense because if you truly think it's murder, like how could you vote for the party that wants to further legalize and codify murder? Like, yeah, obviously, but like, again, like, I don't hear Wilson doing that. Like, what is Wilson's like? Here's an example too. Like, if that was his goal, if that was like his true prerogative, I think you would see it in the way that he would debate people. Have I seen his interview with Trigonometry? I don't think I've seen that one specifically. No, I've seen his Joe Rogan he did recently. I've seen so many different debates. I've seen like several through Modern Day Debate. I've seen a couple of him in Destiny. Do you think there's something distinct about the Trigonometry interview that would change my mind? I could pull it up. Oh, 2 days ago. Wow. Okay. Okay. I can pull it up. I'm assuming you're an Andrew Wilson fan. Yeah, I'm not trying to be abrasive if you are. I'd be happy to like actually go through some of the stuff that, because yeah, I'm for context too, even though I like lean I vote Democrat. I'm a Democrat at this point. Like I would consider myself in a lot of ways like a conservative liberal or whatever.